Hello, this is Maria Ohisalo from Finland. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Indeed we can.
Good.
Maria
Good.
Ohisalo. I am going to start with you. As I understand it, you're on a very tight time frame.
Pretty much, yes. Sorry for that.
No, that's quite all right. We appreciate your being here. And so I will dispense with some of the long introduction and we'll go straight into you. Are we on?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Bonner. I'm the chief editor of the Keypost. I'm bringing you live from the Keypost newsroom with our speakers online, the Zero Corruption Police Mission Possible or Mission Impossible. It's the fourth in a series of Zero Corruption talks produced by the Zero Corruption Conference, which was supposed to take place in April, but like many events because of COVID-19 couldn't. So what we have is the next best thing. We have a series of talks about very important subjects, and today's subject couldn't be more timely, given the international fallout over the murder of George Floyd, incidentally from my hometown of Minnesota. It has reignited debate over police tactics, police effectiveness, police corruption, police cover-up. So I want to start with a very special guest. She is the Interior Minister of Finland, Maria Ohisalo. She is young, quite a reformer, very interesting background. I think for us to start with her, I will set the table by saying, anytime you look at places where trust in law enforcement is high and crime is low, Finland comes out on top. Why is that? And what can we learn about that, both in Ukraine and in America?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here. Really important topic, and as you mentioned, very timely. Definitely, I'm really excited about the fact that the whole world now is talking about corruption, talking about police violence, talking about racism, how to tackle that in the police forces and also in other administrative work. And Finland tends to be known for having very high trust in public authorities, also in other people. I have my background in sociology, and I've done my PhD in social politics sociology, where we have interviewed a lot of people going to bread lines, food aid, and we, from that point of view, for example, noticed that people in marginalized positions tend not to trust police or tend not to trust other authorities that much. And this is something that, while I can say that majority of Finns, over 80 to 90%, do trust police, for example, then we still have that 5 to 15% of people who don't think that everything is still under control and everything is good, and especially marginalized groups, minorities, are in the position to say that trust is not often that good. Well, one really important thing while building trust is obviously how we confront people in the field. And we here in Finland especially want to emphasize the police training, the education, and we have over a three-year education system where police gets a lot of different examples from the field and gets to work with different kinds of people, and I think the trust starts to be built already from that stage. And I have to say, even though I said that the trust is at a quite good level, then when it comes to, for example, corruption, during the past few years, we have noticed a slight reduction in that trust, because we had one very unfortunate case. A high officer was judged for doing crimes, and we do charge everybody as the same way, even though they would have high positions. So But this was something that did eat up the trust a bit among the public. But yes, these are maybe some things that we're working with here.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that case and why? I mean, if the officer was, what did the officer allegedly do? If he was charged, why would that create public discontent?
Yes, the recent development is linked to a serious case where the former director of Helsinki drug squad, a man called Jari Aarnio, was charged and convicted of drug crimes and other offenses also. This Aarnio case is obviously a tragedy, but at the same time, as I mentioned, it also shows that in the end, the Finnish system works because a high-ranking corrupted police chief was also charged and found guilty. And this is obviously something that has raised the discussion up to a new level, because we were so sure that people do trust our police, and then suddenly something like this happens. We need to be more and more careful. We need to have a wide public discussion around this. And obviously one big thing, and personally for me, a really important thing is always to be as open as we can in everything. And this is related to all kinds of documents we have that also the government I'm working in, we tend to release everything we can while we're doing decisions. For example, related to COVID-19, we have outlined that we want to get the data out. We want to put everything out so that people can have a wide public debate on everything. It doesn't always happen. There is still a lot to do, but still, this is something that we're at least emphasizing all the time.
Okay. Maybe you should step back just so we're going to talk about basically the Interior Ministry in Ukraine, which is a very vast operation. Can you give me a sense of how many agencies you're in charge of? Are you in charge of all the police officers in the country?
Yes, well, we have approximately 7,200, 300 this year police officers in Finland. And as I hope you're seeing the slide there, there are also about 1,400 female police officers, and the amount is also rising all the time. We from the Ministry of Interior are in charge of these officers, but then obviously we have the border guards, we have the rescue services, and in total we actually have about 15,000 people working in the sector of the Ministry of Interior.
Mm-hmm. Do you have the National Guard, a National Guard, and are you in charge of that?
No, that's differently at the Ministry of Defense under that.
I see by the information, police used the gun on duty 28 times. Did any of those result in, and that's last year alone, did any result in loss of life?
A couple of them did, yes, but the number is relatively low. And the thing is that every time force is used, force is always the last resort tool. So police always goes to situations and starts with negotiation, starts with discussion together with people in the crime scene. And if these doesn't lead to anything, then force can be used. But every time you use a gun, every time you use force, there is a preliminary report done from that, and that is going through whether there was a crime happened or whether there is a reason to maybe initiate a preliminary investigation on this. So actually what I now heard is that the number to this year is only, was it 6 times? And this is obviously something that now when we're looking at what is happening around the world is that in our police education, we tend to go through that. We tend to say that this is the last, force is always the last tool to use.
Okay, thank you. Did any of the fatal incidents attract kind of even anywhere close to the protest of the George Floyd incident?
Not really, no. Obviously, as I mentioned, openness is always important, and these cases, obviously, it's important that they are out in the public. But what we've seen during the past years is now the not protests, but demonstrations on these things and incidents that are happening around the world, and racism in general in the larger administrative work. So these we've now seen thousands of people marching against racism.
One of the issues worldwide, certainly in America and in Ukraine, is who polices the police. If police are accused of wrongdoing, does that go to an outside agency, or is that within, or do you investigate your own?
If prosecutor is always on top of that. Yes.
Okay. And prosecutors completely independent from your ministry?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, so there's high trust there. I want to talk about transparency because there's a lot of things. I mean, I'm of the age where I remember life before video cameras. And as a matter of fact, I want to note that if the George Floyd murder hadn't been on video, what we would most likely have is a police report that completely fictionalized what happened there. And when I started covering police in St. Paul, Minnesota, a long time ago, most of these incidents were not anywhere close to being video. Video was not ubiquitous. And basically there was the thing called the blue code of silence, where cops didn't talk to each other, and they didn't have their names on their badges. What is the level of transparency that you have? Do people know the name of every officer who approaches them? Is it, are they able to complain easily, or do you still run into this where the cops have to protect each other and don't want any outside interference in what they do?
Yes, the police officers still have their name tags, and one problem we have related to that, and what we are now discussing, is that there has been this, in Finnish we call it goaling. That's okay if you find targeting, maybe targeting is the word. So if there is a police officer at the street, somebody reads the name tag and says that, okay, now we know your name, we're going to go after you and your family, we're going to target you, goal you. And this is something that especially researchers, journalists, and police officers have been lifting up, that this is also a problem, that everybody should be able to freely be in public debates and should have their names out there publicly, but it can also lead to this kind of targeting phenomena, and this is what we're now going through. But obviously every time there is a possibility to make a complaint about an authority, and then the highest at the parliament there is an sorry, I'm looking for the words in English. There is at the parliament, there is a person looking at how all the administrative people at the field work. And if there are any complaints done related to border guards, related to police officers, he or she will go through these complaints. And this parliamentary ombudsman is the term. Sorry, it took a while. So this is really important also.
Okay. I mean, I talked about only one side of the equation, but the other side is police work is very, very dangerous. We just had another fatal shooting in America last night, overnight, Atlanta. And the suspect fought and wrestled and took away a taser gun from the police officer, one of them who ended up shooting him fatally, leading to the resignation of the police chief and the mayor, saying it was not justified use of force. A lot of people dispute that. Have you had any police officers killed in the line of duty?
No, I cannot recall that, not during the past couple of years, but in the past there has been some. But it's been quite a while, and I cannot say that it's over, let's say it's maximum 5 to 7 people or police officers that have been killed during their duty. And actually last autumn, soon it becomes a year, there was a police shooting. 2 suspects were shooting 2 police officers, and they also ran away, and it became quite a big thing here. But the police officers, they survived. There was another attack last autumn at a school. We have a sort of a dark, not to say a reputation, but there has been these school attacks also here in Finland. Often young males attacking other students. And this was also something that the police was a bit injured during their duty.
Okay, so it's dangerous everywhere. When you hear the phrase defund the police, big controversy now, because for some people it means, abolish the law enforcement, which I, personally think is ridiculous. I mean, we need the police to enforce the law and prevent crime and to investigate crime. But what happened in America, and I'm curious about the Finnish example, is that basically we threw so much on the police. They were now in charge of taking care of the homeless, taking care of the mentally ill, going into schools and trying to prevent, outbreaks there, trying to counsel students against using drugs and alcohol. Basically, it was just got way over the bounds, it appears, of policing, law enforcement. What do you think about that, this debate?
Yeah, well, here in Finland, we tend to have very strict lines where each authority can work. This is often sometimes also a problem as you work in silos where you should be working together. And, often social problems are related to many different authorities' fields. And obviously then we can say, and I tend to say as a social politician or a sociologist, that social politics is the best security politics. And this is what we can see from the field, that the less we have homelessness, for example, the less we have unemployment, mental issues, drug issues, obviously this helps the police forces. And that is why all the authorities should also work together. And we have very good models of preventative work at the police. For example, an anchor model where, for example, radicalization is prevented from an early stage. Police is meeting up with minority groups at the field, but also we are meeting with minority groups from the ministry side. We are having these round tables together with marginalized groups who can come there and tell about their experiences. What could we do better as politicians, as police officers at the field? And this preventative work is something that is really good together with social work, for example. And actually, I have to say one thing, that our government's goal now is to actually to increase the number of police officers at the field. And this might sound different because the debate is more about decreasing the police forces and put it down. But the idea here is to increase the numbers so that people would also get this preventative work, so that police officers, social workers could meet these people beforehand, long before crimes would happen and cases, incidents would happen. So this is one way we're trying to build up the trust to police also, that you could meet up with a police officer without that there is a crime happening.
Okay, thank you. I mean, another thing, we got a question from an audience member, and I know you have to run in some minutes. So the audience member wanted to say, ask considering your proximity to Russia, which has been known to have a crime problem, and also as well as export aggression and misinformation, do you feel any influence? Are they in any way strong influence on what's happening inside Finland, for better or worse?
No, I couldn't say that. Obviously, we have a very good cooperation together. For example, at the border guard level, they tend to meet weekly with Russian border guards, and this at the field level, the work is really happening day to day. It's like everyday life, and also together with police forces, we have cooperation to Russian side also. So we're trying to build connections and also trying to exchange best practices. When it comes to, for example, environmental crimes, this is something that I've also spoken together with my colleague, the Russian Minister of Interior, that what we could do better together.
So it's a very positive relationship. Absolutely no evidence of Russian organized crime in Finland that you're aware of?
Well, organized crime is obviously a problem worldwide, and the more world is going into internet and the more organized crime is working in the internet, obviously this is also a problem here. And this is also something that we're trying to work together with Russian police forces, together with Europol, Interpol. We find that the international cooperation is something that we all need to rely on, because none of the countries could work by themselves in these kinds of things.
Okay, thank you for that. Two other areas where Finland always comes out on top or near the top is income, wealth, and happiness. So you're a happy and rich country. Do police officers, are they well paid? Is it prestigious? Are they taken care of in retirement?
I think, yes, when we compare Finnish society to many other societies, we tend to do quite well in service. What I mentioned before, one problem is obviously that we also tend to look at the medium. The people that are doing quite well, they tend to answer to queries and inquiries. But then if we look at the people that are more unemployed, or the levels of mental health problems and so on, if they are worse, then the picture is different from Finland if we look at the whole wide picture. But obviously, yes, we tend to manage quite well, and maybe it's the medium salary the police officers are getting. The more the years you have, the better the salary will be. If you are in a chief position, obviously your salary will be better, but it's not among the best paid authority works. I have to say that.
Okay, thank you for that. We have 5 minutes of your time, I'm told. So we have another question about effectiveness. I mean, law enforcement is supposed to be effective at providing security, preventing crime, and investigating crime. Are you satisfied with your clearance rate of crimes in terms of solving and combating internal security threats?
Well, you could always do better. It's from 60 to 7% of the crimes that we can somehow solve. So we could do better there. And what I mentioned, now this government is putting quite a lot of money into getting more people into the field, but also getting new equipment to the field, because you cannot send an officer to the street without proper equipment, and you always have to take that into account. And obviously, we tend to have different authorities working together. As I mentioned, okay, it can be social workers and police officers, but it can also be border guards and police officers working together if it seems like there is a need for help for other authorities, so we can give help there. But this is something that, even though we tend to trust our internal security authorities quite well, still I have noticed that now when I a year ago came into this position, that actually our resources have been quite low related to many other fields, and the number of police officers related to many other European countries is quite low actually. And this is definitely something that we need to work on. Okay, that's interesting. And you mentioned the case of corruption, but you subsequently, your investigation found this was not endemic. This was, as they say, couple bad apples. Well, you can always ask if a couple of bad apples just pops up, what is the culture behind of a couple of bad apples coming up, and you always have to go wider. You have to look at the bigger picture. Why did this happen? What kind of structures did fell down in order this to happen? So this is definitely something the police and we at the ministry are also thinking now, how to also prevent these kinds of incidents happening again. And transparency here is really important. And maybe also I've thought the role of social media and the role of public debate, how much should we bring these people from the field also to the social medias to meet people, to be there with their names and so on. We try to support people to do that also in order to build this trust. Thank you. It's good to hear. How about our other panelists? Before we lose the Interior Minister, any questions? You guys have been sitting there patiently. We have 2 Finns on the panel, so we're over quoted on Finns. Okay, any closing words for you at all? I could just quickly add up to the last point that obviously we have tried to make better procedures and enhanced measures, and for example, legality control at the Ministry of Interior has been, we have tried to enhance that too. So we are trying to run better and faster all the time, but none of the countries in the world is definitely free from racism, free from corruption, free from violence. And this is why I think it's really important that we now have these debates together worldwide. That we are doing. Okay, I thank you so much for taking your time, and hope to join you again somewhere. Thank you very much for you. Thank you for this panel. Have a great day. You too. Bye-bye. Bye. Now, I'm tired of hearing myself talk, so I would like the other participants to start introducing themselves, and we'll get to move to the different phase of our discussion, which we're now in. We have 90 minutes to do. We'll start, Anastasia.
Colleagues, greetings. Very nice to be in such a campaign. Today, my name is Anastasia Radina, and I'm the head of Anticorruption Committee in the Parliament.
Okay. Antti?
Yes, my name is Antti Hartikainen. I'm coming from Finland, and I'm head of EU advisory mission here in Ukraine.
Khatia?
You hear me? Probably I lost it. Yeah, okay. My name is Khatia Dekanoidze, and well, I used to be the head of the national police, first female head of the national police of Ukraine in 2015, 2016.
Okay. Matilda.
Yes, hello, I'm Matilda Bogner. I'm the head of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, in particular the Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, based here in Kyiv.
Okay, Matthew.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Schaaf. I'm the director of the Freedom House office in Ukraine, and happy to be on this panel with a great list of speakers.
Okay, we don't have Tetiana.
I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
I'm Tetiana Pechonchyk, the head of the Human Rights Center, ZMINA. Our organization is focusing on protection of human rights defenders and civic activists, and we are following the situation of attacks on civic activists and how police is dealing with the investigation of these cases.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to jump in perhaps since the Interior Minister was on time, there's probably a little more housekeeping I should do. All of this, by the way, is available online at the Zero Corruption Talks Facebook page, also on the Keypost website and Facebook page, and for posterity on YouTube, like everything. As I said, this is the fourth talk we've had. The first talk was dedicated to the lessons of Chernobyl, April 26th. May 13th, there was perspectives of Ukraine in the Eastern Partnership. June 3rd, healthcare was the topic. The next Zero Corruption talk will be June 23rd, the prospects and challenges of judicial reform. So continuing with the theme. And I should note that we did invite representatives of the Interior Ministry of Ukraine here. They chose not to participate. So when we talk about Ukraine and law enforcement, we have to talk about Arsen Avakov, the longest serving minister now, 6 years. He is interesting background, came out of the 90s, the wild 90s in Kharkiv, started in business, went to politics, then law enforcement. So one of the things I didn't ask the Interior Minister is how important law enforcement background is to running the police station. Now, since he's not here and people aren't here to speak for him, I will speak the best as I understand it from the President, the Prime Minister, and those who support him, that he is the most effective Interior Minister. There's nobody who could be close, match him in effectiveness. He also is seen as strong in security, strong against Russian invasion, a good crisis manager, and somebody they want in this position. There's another side to the Arsen Avakov case, which I'll get into in a second, but I think we should note, for starters, the vast empire that he controls. 360,000 employees. Many of them are in the National Police. Most of them are about half of them are in the National Police, but also State Emergency Service, the National Guard, the State Border Guard Service, the State Migration Service. It's a huge, huge empire. Budget is going up, 3.5 billion. It's 2.5% of Ukraine's GDP. It's a huge and vast, powerful empire of people with guns. Now, a little bit about his background. He has been obviously involved in politics for a very long time. Came out of Kharkiv. His first business partner, Oleksandra Ustinova, was murdered. Among people who, the current mayor of Kharkiv, Gennady Kernis, accused him of Avakov of involvement. Avakov has denied it. Also, another associate, Evgeny Kushnerov, was killed in a hunting accident in 2007. There's no indication of any involvement or any murder there. 2014, Kernis again was a victim of an assassination attempt, which left him in a wheelchair. He accused Avakov of involvement. Avakov, of course, denied that. So he has a lot of history, but I want to get into particularly some things. I think we'll start out with Tetiana on human rights. There are things that people want from the police, and that is solving and preventing crimes, but also upholding law enforcement and standards within the police department. You're tracking this issue. How do you assess the Interior Ministry?
Yes, you're right. There is a simple thing that we all want, to live in a safe country where journalists, civic activists can live without any fear and protecting basic values or fighting corruption, etc. But unfortunately, it is not the case. Our organization is monitoring and documenting attacks on civic activists and human rights defenders after Euromaidan. So in these years, we've documented over 400 single cases of different types of attacks, including threats, physical abuses, fabricated criminal cases against civic activists, defamation, smear campaigns, And half of it, roughly 200 cases, are physical attacks, among them 8 murders, and also beatings and attacks on the property of activists, for example, on their cars, burning their houses, etc. So when we have this pile of attacks, it is important to understand who are the most vulnerable groups who are subjected to the vast majority of all these attacks. And we see several groups. These are anti-corruption activists from Kyiv and from regional cities, from villages. These are environmental protection activists and also human rights defenders who protect different minorities and vulnerable groups like LGBTI community. And when it comes to the reason why all these people are attacked, I would say that there are 2 main reasons. First is corruption, because very often these activists, they challenge some corruptive schemes, they protest against some organized crime, etc., etc., including also environmental protection activists, because they are also, when they protect the environment, very often they discover some corruptive schemes. So the first reason is still existing corruption, and the second reason is hatred towards hate to, for example, LGBTI community. So this second type is ideologically motivated attacks. But I would like also to speak about one reason that is institutional. Why all these attacks are happening and why all of them are taking place. And this reason is impunity. We are in a contact with many of these activists who were attacked, and we try to follow how their cases are investigated. And I would say that a vast majority, over 19% of these cases, due to our assessment, are not investigated efficiently. And so this existing impunity, this is a fuel to the new types of attacks, because it's very easy to frighten the person with just using the physical force against the activist. And therefore, we also documented the cases when the activist was not stopped after the first attack and continued its activity. The person was attacked 2 times, sometimes 3 times, sometimes even we have the case when one activist was attacked during 10 years, he was attacked 4 times. For his environmental protection activism and protest against illegal building construction. Therefore, of course, we understand that it would be wrong to say that efficiency means that police always has to find those perpetrators who committed these attacks, but efficiency means that police and prosecutors' office, they have to do all possible steps to investigate these attacks. And what we see, they are not doing even a minimum of needed steps that are expected from them. And even in very, very rare cases, when they manage to find those people who committed the attacks, they never go for those who ordered these attacks. And so those people ordering and paying money to the so-called titushki, or like thugs that can commit other crimes, those people who orders attacks, they just keep they do not have any responsibility for their crimes. So when we look deeper into the reasons why police is not investigating these cases efficiently, we think that there are many reasons. It's lack of competence, and also it's a big number of criminal proceedings per one investigator, so it's physically not possible for them to investigate. Very often it's wrong qualification of the case. Very often police qualifies the attack as just a simple hooliganism, not looking who is behind the attack. And for example, also it is the case of hate motivated attacks when they do not have this motive of hate, and they also qualify attacks on LGBTI activists as hooliganism, as it was with our volunteer of our organization that was attacked attacked several years ago after Kyiv Pride with a clear motive of hate, but police qualified it as a hooliganism, and then all investigation stopped, and this case was not investigated like other 200 of physical attacks on human rights defenders. And also, we see from the number of cases that police is not only having not enough capacities or lack of knowledge or lack of human resources to investigate, but they by purpose sabotage investigation of these cases. For example, because in some cases we believe they are in a way somehow connected to those who committed this attack with the alleged perpetrators. And also we see it from the qualification of the cases that sometimes they do this wrong qualification at the beginning. I want to remind you that attack on Katerina Handziuk, famous activist, also was at the first stage qualified as a hooliganism when she was received 1 liter of sulfuric acid on her. It was a hooliganism. And also the attack on Sergei Sternenko with knives, and we have the also evidences that it was organized and paid, but they also qualified as a hooliganism. And also, as I said, the LGBTI attacks the same. And so I think that the biggest problem here, and here I want just to conclude the situation, the problem is that we don't have efficient reform of police. It started from the patrol police, which is only the facade, the surface of the whole police. But the reform didn't move forward to those people, to investigators, to those people who are dealing with investigation of the cases. And as a result, we have the situation when police does no preventive action to prevent this crime. No security measures are provided for the activists who asked about this security because they were threatened. And Ukraine is not safe for human rights defenders. I know from the organizations dealing with the journalist attacks that the same story we have with attacks on journalists. And therefore, we have the situation when in Ukraine there is no clear repressive machinery to suppress civil society as it exists, for example, in Kazakhstan, in Belarus, in Russia, in other countries. But here we have just the problem of the system, and the problem with investigation leads to the situation when it's not the safe place for us to live in. And I think one of the reasons is that there is no political will to continue the reform of police. And the problem is with Mr. Avakov, who is on the top of this problem, enjoying his seventh year being the Minister of Interior with no responsibilities of what is happening with those attacks. And therefore our organization, together with 85 other human rights organizations, civil society organizations from all Ukraine, we are demanding for almost 2 years, we are demanding that he has to leave his post.
Do you, maybe it's a good time to bring Khatia into the discussion. Khatia, if you're here. But Tetiana, you say you keep track of these cases. What, is there a website where people can go to and?
Yes, there is a coalition of human rights organization, which is called Coalition to Protect Civil Society, with an online map of attack. But we also publishing monitoring reports annually and also quarterly on our website. And the last reports, they are available in Ukrainian and also in English.
Okay. And to be clear, when you bring up these issues to Avakov, do you get a response?
We met many times with different. We never managed to meet Mr. Avakov in person, but we meet his deputy, and we met the deputy of the head of the national police. We bring this issue first time back in 2017, before this big wave of attacks on civic activists, but they didn't do anything meaningful and didn't follow none of our recommendations so far.
Okay, thank you. Khatia, I want to bring you in because in researching and going over this for this webinar today, I came across a 2009 article in the Keypost, and it's been chronicled by United Nations, Freedom House, U.S. State Department, and so forth. Then the issue was the police cleared a lot of cases, solved a lot of cases, but it was criticized as being under duress. Either they would torture or beat suspects to get a confession, or put them in pre-trial detention until they confessed. And that was 2009. You came on the scene in 2015, when the year after we experienced horrific, allegedly, police abuse in the murder on the streets of by police snipers of 100 demonstrators. And the hope was, of course, that those mass murders have never been solved, like many crimes in Ukraine. But the hope was, big hope, and it looked for a while, police reform was going to take root. We had higher salaries, we had some training standards, we had better cars, Toyota cars from the Japanese government, and we had this hope. Can you tell me what you inherit? What was the situation when you came in? What were you able to accomplish, and how do you look? And what were you able not to accomplish, and what were the obstacles in your way? And now, 4 years later, how do you assess the reports? I mean, the state of police reform.
Well, thank you very much for the floor, and I'm really thrilled that I can participate in this absolutely important webinar, and talking about the Ukrainian National Police and the rule of law and the criminal justice system, which is kind of very close to me, and I'm a great supporter and a huge supporter of the reforms in Ukraine. Well, actually, I have to say that in 2015, when we started, all this started, I mean, the reform of the patrol police, a lot of Ukrainians, not only our team, were very motivated, because, this, when we dismissed the DAI, which was a, patrol police we inherited from the Soviet Union, and new uniforms, like 15,000 new patrol police officers, showed up in Kiev and some other cities with absolutely new approach. I mean, it was very motivational for the people of Ukraine. And also, we started the second stage of the reform, which was a recertification of the militia officers. I mean, who really wanted to become the police officers, because it was written in the this law in the police that all these people, like 1 in 10, probably 1,000 people, they had this kind of responsibility to be recertificated. And to say, frankly, we all were very, very enthusiastic about the police reform, because first stage was kind of started very well, but later on, after a year, just I can say that nothing changed at all. I mean, after recertification, about 93% of these old militia officers, they just came back because of the judges, because of the decision of the court. What I've seen right now, and a lot of journalists, a lot of experts have been asking, what was the reason? So probably Tetiana was right saying that it's a lack of political will, because I mean, if there is no rule of law, if there is no just fair justice system in the country, so it's, I mean, democracy and the strong institutions, there is no the future for this kind of development of the country. So what I mean under the political will is probably everybody's aware about that, because first of all, I mean, when we talk about the police reform and the rule of law, we have to know that the reform is not about the police. I mean, when we're talking about the rule of law, it's about the reforming, just the whole criminal justice system, I mean, together, like starting from the police, and not only the patrol police, because the patrol police reform was the first stage, but the criminal police, which is very important part, I mean, the investigative part of the National Police of Ukraine, we try to touch it, like, really to shake it, but unfortunately, what we've seen right now, it's still the same, right? And also the reform of the prosecution system, General Prosecutor Office, it's very much important. And the final, probably the core of the rule of law is the judiciary system, because without the fair justice and the fair judiciary system, I mean, there can't be any talks about the rule of law in the country. So absence of the political will, I mean, probably just recently BBC Ukraine asked me, what do you mean, who is guilty? I mean, and the whose responsibility is that there is no finished policy reform in Ukraine? And I said, like, probably the whole political establishment, starting from the president and the ministers and probably the parliament, because parliament is a just legislative and the representative body which must be participating, involved in the just the legal background of all these huge reform. And probably all those people who really think that there are some people who can really put themselves above the law. So that is a problem probably in the criminal justice system in Ukraine. So I think that after the elections of President Zelensky and everybody thought that this is the first stage. Now we can have the final institutional changes, because it's not about the person who will be the minister or who will be the chief of the national police. It's about the institution, to build up the institution which has only one philosophy. I mean, the Ministry of Internal Affairs or the national police, one philosophy, and this philosophy is like the prevent, defend, and defend the human rights and the properties and investigate, and nobody is from the political side can interfere into the investigation or into the operational activities. So probably a number one reason, and I declared it while I was in my statement when I was resigning, 2016, it was a political interference, because if you are then the chief of the national police and you don't have the rights to fire your deputies, or you just appoint the new deputies, or to appoint the new chiefs of oblasts, or the middle level management and the high level management. So there is no sense to be the chief of the national police at all. So, and my view, how it can be solved, I mean, in Ukraine, finally, to get the fair criminal justice, it's like to absolutely to move out the political factors. I mean, so police must be independent. Police chief must be a person who really understands the philosophy of the reform, because right now the whole world is talking about the reform of the police, especially after the huge manifestations in the United States. But what is a police reform? Police reform is absolutely new philosophy and new approach of the police institutions to the service, right? Because if you are in service, number one responsibility you as a police officer is like to have this community policing approach, because it's important, because police is a part of the community. I mean, police officers are not the persons who are coming outside of this world, right? So to move out the political factors, this is number one. The second probably is like to move out our military factors. Probably, I mean, the demilitarization of the Ministry of Internal Affairs is very much important. And the third probably it's like to punish the people who are against the law, who conduct themselves and abuse power. It's very much important. So because if you got the corruption into the system, if the system is built up the way that it is covering, the parts of the system, so that's nothing can be changed, right? Actually, I want to just really remember the several cases in 2015 and 16, and it was when we created the kind of the unit. We tried to transform and reform the unit. I mean, internal security unit within the national police of Ukraine. Well, I have to say that we have been arresting a lot of, just police officers who had some kind of misconduct or just a corruption cases or whatever. Some, and they tried to put themselves above the law. But unfortunately, there were a lot of cases when, the cases were not finalized into the court, or again, as a recertification process, they tried to really come back to the system, and 93% from the 9,000 militia officers, they are still in the system, right? I have to say that there probably it's not about only the technical issue, right? How to really build up structurally the national police of Ukraine or the ministry. It's about the political issue, right, in Ukraine, because finally, what can be done in terms of to really just meet the requests of Maidan in 2014, because it was about the justice, right? When people, came out the street and they all demanding the fair criminal justice system. It was about the Euro-Atlantic choice. It was about the, choice of the Ukrainians who really think that, okay, just nobody can really be defended from the police. And I have to say that political will is very much important. Political will, which must come right now from President Zelensky himself, I have to say, because he's a person who's got this huge rate, and a very high trust in the Ukrainian society. And, he has to realize that if there is no rule of law, in the country, so there is no economic development, and there is no, the democratic development, and good criminal justice system with very strong institutions, organizational structure, and organizational culture is very much important. What I probably, just we all talk about what is wrong, and we all know what is wrong. And I fully just support all the ideas which Tetiana mentioned, that, activists and anti-corruption activists in Ukraine and all these people, I know them all, and we met several times, probably, we talked a lot, but they all know, the society knows what is wrong. But I think that we all have to just discuss right now what we can do in terms of to really transform the system, like to in accordance with Ukrainian needs. And I think that the first, probably the change of the management is very much important. The high management and the high managers and the middle level managers. I really don't like to compare Georgia and Ukraine, because in Georgia, we've done the huge police reform. And actually, I have to say that it was a success story. I'm not comparing these two countries because there are a lot of, differences, but still, but number one factor why police worked like, in Georgia and had a trust of 80% was like political will. And nobody ever in the team, in the high level managers or in the middle, nobody ever could really just afford that, okay, there is a law, but I can really violate the law and I can put myself above the law. So I have to say that what I see right now, and this is very unfortunate, it's number one that when after this tragic event in when a woman was raped and she was beaten in the police station, it's like, I don't know, it was very tragic for me also. And when you ask, and the journalists ask, just official persons from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, okay, what is the answer? The answer was that they all just put the arrows on me, like that the person who was behind them, just in 2015 and 16. That's not a solution. Okay, you can blame whoever, I mean, Khatia, or I mean, some other people and the team who had been working in the reforms, but actually you as an official person must really distribute the right solution for the problem. And what is the right solution? It is right to show the political will, starting from the president and minister, that, okay, just that's it. Now we have to build up the new rule of law and the criminal justice system. So that's my understanding how the political establishment must really act in terms of just to defeat this very bad, corrupted swamp, unfortunately, which again is a kind of heritage from the Soviet Union. Because, well, I mean, I was born also in the Soviet country, right, in Georgia. So, and I remember how it was in Georgia, because Georgian law enforcement system was considered very corrupted, extremely corrupted. So we had a lot of organized crime teams, and we had this, you know, the 16 laws in Georgia who were covering everything, and organized crime was also the core of the law enforcement system itself. So what we've done is that we showed the very big political will and tough political will. So just arresting these people, and firing all these top managers from the ministry itself, you know, bringing new one. I guess I was expecting this kind of moves, approaches, especially after the shooting in Bravarach. I mean, just recently in Kiev, because for me and probably for all Ukrainians, it is just a sign that, okay, this institution is not really working well and for Ukrainians. And somehow it was like the remembering of the 90s, early 19s in Georgia and Ukraine, when we got this, you know, clashes of the gangs. And look, what's happening is that, several people have been arrested, some police officers fired, but unfortunately that is not enough. What will be enough is the very efficient, effective, tough changes into the system. I mean, without any political will and without this synchronized reform of the judiciary and the police, and the prosecution system, unfortunately, I don't see any future for the rule of law in Ukraine.
Well, that's sobering. Khatia, stay with us. There's a long way to go in this discussion. We still have an hour, and I want to bring in others who have been silent so far. I also neglected to mention this conversation is in English, but it's interpreted in Ukrainian. So even though your button might say Korean, we're not translating it into Korean. It's actually into Ukrainian. So Matthew Schaaf, you've heard the discussion for an hour. What's your take on what's the situation?
Great, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Anti-Corruption Action Center, and everyone for this event. I have a few points that I want to focus on, but also to agree with the previous speakers about the fact that the reform was partial. And so that very much, I think, contributes to the situation that we're in now, not only within the police, but then also within the entire law enforcement and judicial system. And so, unfortunately, there needs to be significant changes on a variety of levels within and outside the national police. Also, I think there's been a lot of discussion about Minister Avakov and other leaders, and one of the main challenges to reform is the politicization of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. This is a ministry. This is a position that should be focusing on protecting, providing for the safety and security of everyone, and I think the politicization of the position really takes away from that. So I represent Freedom House. It's a human rights organization, an organization that advocates for freedom, for democratic development, and so that's the framework that we look at through which we consider these issues. And I'd say in Ukraine, the main sort of set of questions that we're looking at with respect to the police is everyone being treated fairly, and are the police doing the job that they can do to ensure the realization of everyone's human rights and participation in a democratic society. And so the area that I'd like to focus on specifically is the area of professional accountability and responsibility for law enforcement officials. There was a question that was posed, and I will partially respond to it regarding, in particular, accountability mechanisms. And so, what we see when we're talking about, the issue of civic activists and human rights defenders, like Tanya was mentioning, and many others, is a lack of police accountability for doing their jobs, for protecting people, for following procedure. And then what this ends up doing is this lack of accountability then cascades into ongoing impunity and lack of accountability for the people who are actually responsible for the crime, the administrative violation, or whatever it may be. And so if we take hate motivated violence, so violence against people because of who they are, based on their race, their sex, their sexual orientation, the color of their skin, any number of characteristics, that the lack of accountability for police doing their job starts at the very beginning. And the end result is that for the people who are responsible for these hate motivated incidents, there's very little accountability. And so, for example, if we're talking about Roma community, this is one community in Ukraine that very much needs the services and support of the police and very rarely gets them. And actually, I had a colleague recently tell me, when I was asking about recent incidents of violence against Roma community, that it's actually the police that are responsible for a vast majority of the police that are responsible for many of the incidents against the Roma community. And when it comes to the police response to hate motivated hate crimes, hate motivated violence, as I said, the problem starts at the very beginning with the incident not being registered properly. And so they come to the scene of an incident, and they, for example, don't record that the victim believes that the crime was committed on a hateful basis. And so the investigation sort of veers off in the wrong direction from the very beginning. So, for example, it will be recorded as a simple hooliganism, and then it's unlikely that the hooliganism charge will actually sort of make it to the very end, and thus people will be held accountable. But really, what it means is that society is not capturing the fact that these incidents of hate motivated violence are happening, and the people who are responsible for it are not being held accountable. And so it just continues and continues because there's basically very little consequence for doing this kind of thing. This is very much an issue for LGBT community. And what the Finnish internal minister was saying about how the trust of the police is very important. What we find among LGBT community, among many communities, is that there's very little trust among the police, that if you go to the police when you need help, when an incident has occurred, when a crime has happened, that they will treat you fairly, that they will do their jobs. And so I think that's why you see a major difference in the numbers that the police report on hate-motivated incidents and the numbers that civil society organizations report on hate-motivated incidents. And so the police are saying that there's a relatively low amount, and the civil society organizations, which apparently have higher levels of trust among these vulnerable communities, are capturing a lot more information. And so, unfortunately, the police are not seen as credible allies for these people, for these communities. And so that's what we've been advocating for is for stronger accountability mechanisms to ensure that police are doing their job. So, for example, that a criminal complaint is required to be registered in the Register of Pretrial Investigations within 24 hours. In Ukraine, and this very frequently does not happen. And so, one of the recommendations we made is that police be held accountable for not registering these criminal complaints in a timely fashion. Now, of course, it is important to give credit where credit is due. And, on LGBT community, for example, with respect to public events, equality marches, pride events, and so on, there has been a real important improvement in the police capacity to provide for security and safety of these events in the big cities. So in Kyiv and Kharkiv, in particular, in recent years, and that is a major improvement in that area. But there are many other challenges in how the police provide for or enable people to realize and enjoy their freedom of assembly and freedom of expression. And what we see quite frequently are arbitrary decisions that are made by police that end up result in violations of freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. And so there needs to be a good deal of education and training of police on how they can properly do their jobs, protect public safety, while also ensuring that people can realize their rights. So, after President Zelensky's election, there was an infamous case in Rivne where 2 teenagers were detained by the police on trumped-up accusations of violating the procedure on holding a peaceful assembly. There was a case just a couple of weeks ago in Kharkiv where the police the officers there essentially were advocating on behalf of some protesters from radical groups and not allowing someone who also had some issue or something that they wanted to share in the public space, and sort of moving them off to the side and sort of playing favorites essentially. And we see this quite frequently when it comes to peaceful assemblies and crowd control and tactics, where basically the people who are willing to use violence, the people that are willing to throw eggs, to attack people, and so on, are in fact able to control the situation. And so this is a question of policing priorities and policing tactics, rather than allowing. There has not been a focus on allowing people to peacefully express themselves and to deal appropriately, in my opinion, with people who are willing to use violence, who are actually using violence against peaceful protesters and expression.
Well, we got.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, we have a case right now. I just wanted to bring in Oleksandra Ustinova, a member of parliament from Golos, Sergei Sternyenko. What's going on there right now? He's the Odessa activist who was attacked, and yet in what seems like a perversion of justice, he was charged with murder for defending himself. This case is being heard in Kyiv, and I understand there's some developments outside the courthouse. Oleksandra, are you?
Hi everybody. Thanks a lot for introducing me and for letting me join your talk today. Yes, I have right now our colleagues at the courthouse, and it's been very hot there at the moment because the police started to attack some of the activists. As long as I know, so far 5 or 6 people have been arrested. The MPs from Golos are following them to the police station just to make sure that they're safe and okay. One of the MP was almost brought down to the ground, and he was trying to protect the girlfriend of Sergei Sternyenko, who is right now at the court. He managed to do it, but this is ridiculous when police is literally attacking not only activists with fires, let's say, but also women standing in front of the courthouse. I was there myself on Friday, and frankly speaking, I had kind of a flashback to 2013 when we were standing at Maidan. I totally understand that all these people who went through these so-called commissions and attestations are the same people that stood there at Maidan in 2013. Unfortunately, they still do not understand that people standing in front of the courthouse are not being paid. I've heard a lot of them discussing and asking us how much we're being paid. Unfortunately, they would not even let, which is the violation of the Ukrainian law, to let people in the courthouse, because we had more than 100 people willing to take Sternenko on bail. And they wouldn't let these people go into the courthouse and fill in their applications. So if not MPs who literally had to stand down and organize a corridor for people to go into the courthouse, nothing of that would have happened. So as long I can just say, because I'm working in the law enforcement committee, that everything I am looking at, like all the police reform that we had been talking about, had touched only in some of the regions, only the patrol police. The criminal police had never been reformed, and the circumstances of this is obvious at the moment. As long as I know, the State Bureau of Investigation right now has more than 5,000, not 100, but 5,000 cases of the police violation of rights and tortures and beating up people in the police stations. I'm trying to dig into this at the moment and try to understand at least in what regions this is one of the key issues, but as long as I understand, this is a national problem that has to be solved. On the other side, we know that Ukraine is going, just like all the rest of the world, is going through a lot of difficulties with the virus and COVID. And unfortunately, police is taking it as an advantage to increase their salaries. Recently, last week, we all been aware that 2.7 billion hryvnias were allocated to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and all this money will go to the police to increase their salaries, or so-called pay the deductibles to their official salary, because they're fighting the COVID. It means that their salaries will increase at least up to 50%. And comparing to the salaries that the doctors receive at the moment, that would be much higher. For you to understand, the average police officer will receive at least 30,000 hryvnias additional to, during the COVID crisis, so which is 3 months, additional to his official salary, just because he's fighting COVID. We all remember the pictures of 12 police officers chasing a naked man in downtown Kyiv at Trukhanov Island. And for you to understand, each one of them will get additional around 10,000 hryvnias for 12 armed police officers chasing the so-called violation of COVID rules downtown Kyiv after a naked man. So I can state right now that we have a very sad, news about the police reform, which has actually failed. We do have some good police, patrol police officers that are trying, even some of the regions, to oppose Avakov and the rest of the police bosses, but they're weak, and they do not have any kind of, and that's what Khatia was saying, any kind of political support, unfortunately. Avakov. Yes.
Can I ask you, before we get to Avakov, I mean, who polices the police in this country?
Who places? I'm sorry, could you please?
Who polices the police? If the police commit a crime, who is investigating it? Who is?
So right now, the State Bureau of Investigation is supposed to investigate the police, and that's why I was telling you about the 5,000 cases about brutality and violation of human rights by the police officers that the State Bureau of Investigation is investigating at the moment. But unfortunately, we understand that the State Bureau of Investigation is not an independent body. We still have the so-called acting head of the bureau, and there has been attempts to organize an independent election committee for the last half a year. But again, there is no political will to actually build an independent. This is the problem of every president, and I would say every power that comes into Ukraine. Everybody wants to control the law enforcement. Nobody wants to build an independent law enforcement. And we can see the same problem right now with Zelensky and his team. The only independent law enforcement that we can talk about at the moment is NABO, but they're trying to take an advantage and take over it again and again. Okay,
that's NABO, National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Your among the signatories of the movement to fire Avakov. Is that true? Why?
Yes, it is. Why? Because, you know, we have this, because Avakov is the only person who should be responsible for failing of the police reform. Avakov has been in power for the last 6 years. He has been in power since 2014. So I was, frankly speaking, very much surprised, not to say more strong words, when Gerashchenko came out press conference, the deputy head of Avakov, the deputy minister of internal affairs, and actually said that Khatia Dekanoidze was the one responsible for failing the reform. Avakov is the person who actually took the responsibility, should take the responsibility for it, because he is the one who was first leading it, and then he was the one who was trying to do everything possible for this police reform to fail. Because we remember that Khatia was first responsible for the patrol police, but when it came to the criminal police that was supposed to be reformed, that had never happened. Secondly, I understand that the majority of the cases the police investigates at the moment is some small, let's say, cases that I don't know, probably a neighbor stealing something from a neighbor, but nothing serious is being investigated. And frankly speaking, if you look at the declarations of the top police officers, you understand that these people are not fighting corruption, but they are actually leading this corruption inside the system. And recently, when Avakov pushed a very negative bill on the criminals in law, so-called, through the national parliament, I was very opposing it, because this is the bill that would let them control not criminal laws. It has nothing to do with the criminal laws, but every person in this country, and extend his powers to basically anybody in Ukraine.
What is a secret police department? Is there such a thing that's been created?
There has been a so-called secret police department created. It is not secret anymore. We actually pushed the Minister of Internal Affairs to publish the official documents about this department. It is weird at some point, because it does have the parallel functions with the security system, with the security service at the moment, because frankly speaking, I was very much surprised to learn that this department is supposed to protect me as an MP, but I have never even heard about it, or I had never seen even a presentation about this department. But as long as I understand, at the moment, they will be focusing on the local elections and protecting local elections. They will be focusing on people working for the state and activists as well. That is why I was really advising the Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs to have a large meeting with the activists, because if you are supposed to protect them and investigate all the attacks that Tetiana was talking about previously, you're the one who is supposed to meet them and let them be aware that you're investigating it or that you need their help.
Okay. I want to go to our other MP. I knew her as Anastasia Radina. She is now Anastasia Radina, and she is a member of the ruling Servant of the People Party. That's the president's party, which controls parliament. So she is as close as we're going to get in this conversation to answering from the authorities. Anastasia, you voted for, as I understand it, you voted to confirm Avakov twice. And it seems strange to people because Zelensky was brought in to bring in new faces. Avakov is many things. He's not a new face. And is it true? Do you still support him? And do you, I mean, you know, back to what Khatia said, you have to recognize that it's like alcoholism. You have to recognize there's a problem before you fight it. You have to recognize the police are ineffective at solving crimes, and there's allegations of corruption before you can attack it and establish rule of law. But the president and the prime minister say, no, he's great, he's effective, he has to stay in his job. What is your, you know, you've heard a lot of criticism, and I'd like to get your views about how much of it you think is right and how much of it you think is wrong.
Thank you very much, Brian. I don't think I will be speaking on behalf of the whole fraction, I have only myself and my own position to comment on. Yes, it is true that I was one of those who voted for the cabinet, who in September last year voted in favor of the composition of cabinet of ministers, which included the Minister of Interior in his current position. I did not support this voting second time, and now I am one of those who did sign the draft decree of the parliament to dismiss Minister of Interior from his position. From my perspective, after the brutal rape that happened in small Ukrainian town in Khaharlik, the issue of police reform is just past the line beyond which it is possible to make any political claims that police reform is anything to do with success. I think we are also beyond the line after which we can say that police reform is ongoing. There are widespread claims that cases of rape and police abuse, brutal cases, do happen around the world. This is the sad reality in which police work in many countries. I'm not in a position to comment on that, but what I can comment on is that the situation when rapes, abuses, beatings, killings continue, people who are involved in these cases are first dismissed, but then reappear on police positions in different departments of police. Such a situation cannot be called a police reform, ongoing police reform, and of course not a successful police reform in basically any civilized country of the world. Therefore, I do think that police reform, unfortunately, is not ongoing. I cannot say that police reform is successful. I can only refer to the number that Ms. Dekanoidze voiced. 93% of police officers who were dismissed were then reinstated on their positions in police. While police claims that 49% of Ukrainians does trust the police, there's also a growing number of victims, of percentage of victims who refuse to report crimes against them to police. This percentage is 39% as of the end of last year, and this percentage is growing. I think the year before that it was 40%. I think this number, the number of people who choose not to report crimes against them to police, is the valid and most accurate symptom of how police reform is doing, and this is not something we can close our eyes on.
Okay. I think we have, please all stay with us. It's very great discussion. We have 30 minutes left. I want to bring in our internationals, starting with Matilda Bogner. United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission. It sounds like there's a lot to monitor here.
Yes, indeed. Certainly we spend a lot of time monitoring a lot of the issues that people have raised today, and underlying many of the different issues is the issue of impunity and lack of accountability. So we would certainly agree with what many of the speakers are saying, that what we're looking at is a structural problem. It's a systemic problem. It's not about any one particular isolated incident, but these incidents do show that underneath there is a systemic problem that needs to be addressed. So we also followed through the media the events in Khaharlik, and it was an awful incident, but it did show this ongoing structural problem within the police, but as others have also said, more broadly across the law enforcement system, so from police to prosecution to judiciary. We think in order to start dealing with it more effectively, we need to have new and improved methods of criminal investigation. We need effective prosecution of alleged perpetrators, and we need protection of victims, because as people said, the level of trust is not very high. If you are a victim of a crime, and if you're, in particular, if you're a victim of a crime that has been committed by law enforcement officers themselves, then you're not going to be very likely to want to report that to the police or to others within the law enforcement system. Some very concrete things that we have been lobbying for is to end the practice whereby confession is relied upon as a proof of criminal prosecution. Often in cases, the only evidence will be confession, and this leads to the issue of torture and ill treatment by the police. There's an incentive on them to get a confession, so they use brute force to get it, and then we have this problem of torture. We also think, and it won't be a full solution, but it is another measure to take, is mandatory video recordings of all interrogations. Again, looking at the issue of torture, all cases where there is evidence should be duly prosecuted. We monitor so many cases where there is sufficient evidence, but where law enforcement just looks at it and closes the case. We write advocacy letters, we say, we understand the case was closed, but there was this and this and this. They may reopen it and then it gets reclosed again. So the cases are not systematically prosecuted, but rather when there is some interest, it's more likely to be systematically closed rather than going on to court. We also think, as I mentioned before, that victims need to be better protected. Witnesses, their families need to be better protected. People need to know that if they bring evidence to court or to the police or to the prosecution, that they will be protected and that they will be able to speak openly about what happened. We also think that there's need for more training. Investigators are not sufficiently trained. They often re-traumatize victims by inappropriate ways of questioning and approaching victims and witnesses. They put stigma onto victims and witnesses. They blame victims. They do gender stereotyping and perhaps other forms of stereotyping, racial and so on, which is what we're hearing about globally. So this is a concern, and again, it makes it less likely that victims will report, or if they do report, less likely that they will carry through until we see a prosecution and a conviction. One particular concern that we also have is the way that the police deal with cases in the conflict area in the east, close to the contact line. We've found that whilst obviously the police should be fully investigating and taking cases through the criminal justice system, our observations have shown that the police in areas close to the contact line are very reluctant to investigate alleged human rights violations committed by the military or by other armed actors there. So that's something else we think particular attention needs to be paid to. After these recent events in Khahalek, we saw a high-level meeting with the Minister of Internal Affairs, the head of National Police and others, and they did make a plan. They announced a zero tolerance policy and an action plan. And whilst we haven't seen that action plan, we hope that these are not just words, that these commitments will be meaningful in some way. We've also heard from others about the policing of public assemblies. That's something else that we monitor. And as has been mentioned, we have seen an improvement by the police in this area. Clearly, there was political will to improve this, and it has been improved. And in particular, for the LGBTI community, we have seen improvements in how those public assemblies have been policed in the last 2 years. So that is positive. At the same time, we still see attacks on activists, as have been mentioned by the others today. And we see some of those attacks happen right in front of the police. We have documented cases where Media workers have been attacked in front of the police, and the police have refrained from intervening. They've also often refrained from taking appropriate witness statements and so on, and then following up in terms of investigation. We also saw with some of the clashes between religious communities that happened in early 2019, again, police were often there, were often witnessing it, but chose not to intervene. And again, another category has been with the defense lawyers who have been defending their cases, and then in court premises or near the court building have been attacked by other individuals. The police have been present, but again, failed to intervene. These are the types of situations, obviously, that lead to impunity, that lead to a low trust in the police, and that need to be dealt with. The final area where we've been doing monitoring is for hate crimes. Others have mentioned this also. There's an issue of the police not always appropriately classifying crimes as hate crimes or crimes against the media. There's a specific article in the criminal code for crimes against media workers. We have seen some improvement in terms of classifying these types of crimes appropriately, but it still needs to be further strengthened and improved. So that's just a few things from my side.
Yeah, it's a lot. One other thing I wanted to ask about, and I haven't checked on the situation in a while, but international human rights organizations have criticized in the past the very lengthy pretrial detention. You pick a suspect up and you throw them in jail for days, weeks, months with no trial, no formal charges even sometimes. Basically another tool to get a confession. Has that situation improved?
We have seen with conflict-related cases, there has been some improvement after the Constitutional Court found one of the articles of the code invalid, which had meant almost automatic pretrial detention. So there's been a little bit of improvement in that very specific type of case, but overall we are still very much concerned about too much pretrial detention, and that the courts and the prosecutors don't accept putting people on bail or other forms of alternatives to detention during the pretrial phase.
Okay. We started with a Finn, let's end with a Finn. Antti Hartikainen, European Union Advisory Mission. You have a plan for all what you've heard now?
Yes, thanks a lot, Brian. First of all, sorry for this background noise, what you can surely hear, because it's raining cats and dogs outdoor, and it's very noisy actually in my small apartment. I have just returned from Finland, and I'm in 2 weeks self-isolation now, enjoying this period of time. Then now, in the beginning, I would like to say first that I'm just talking on behalf of EU Advisory Mission and not on behalf of other international actors. And now regarding this conference, I have to say that I'm kind of concerned that nobody from the Minister of Interior or from the senior management of national police are not participating in this discussion. I really would have liked to see them also here responding to these questions and contributing to this discussion. But then I was asked to highlight a little bit these achievements of police reform in Ukraine and during the last 6-7 years, and of course a lot of positive development as well, that we should not forget that it's not only negative things what we should raise. And first of all, because of this setting up and creation of this patrol police, which is a good initiative we consider, and a kind of good success. And regardless of that, their training period is very, very short. I think it's only something few months, and then they go to work. And then also because of then they are working only in these big cities, these patrol police. But in addition, the other areas, they developed this kind of like a quick response teams. And because of the creation of this patrol police and these quick response teams, this response time to different kind of appeals and requests of citizens has been decreasing significantly, which is extremely important, that they are really able to provide this support quicker than in the past. And then I think that the most important development, positive development from the mission point of view is this improvement of public order management. And I'm talking about different kind of mass events and protests. And police has been, in my opinion, pretty successful in this regard. I'm now, for example, referring to these previous elections last year, that our observation was very positive, and they have been able to communicate more effectively. They have been also to de-escalate many events or problems. Then, even if it was mentioned already that the Ministry of Interior, it's very politicized. Surely it's a political body, must be actually kind of politicized. But I think that in the police, that they are less politicized nowadays, and they have been also very neutral in many occasions. And this was also the case now during the last elections, and we are very happy of this development. And regarding elections, for example, when they cooperated very closely with different NGOs, like this Opora, which is monitoring these elections and developing these election procedures, they were also pretty happy with their assessment last year. Then regarding this development strategy, which is of course extremely important, we are happy with their cooperation with the mission when we were drafting or supporting this drafting of this development strategy till 2023. But then when we go to these areas that where we should improve, this strategy is also a problem, because Ministry of Interior, they have not been approving this. And without this approval, of course, there is no effective implementation. So that this political level commitment, there is some room for improvement. And only by implementing this strategy, they could actually follow these European best practices, which has been a lot introduced in this strategy.
Antti, what are the key areas that you're still waiting for approval from the Interior Ministry?
This is how this strategy, they should get it approved. There is no specific key area, it's how the strategy document should be approved.
And that has not happened.
No, we have been waiting for quite a long time now. That this is a kind of disappointment, I have to say.
So it's stalled basically until
it has been quite a while there. Okay, we hope that they would be able to sort it out soon, but it is something that where they should speed up.
You have access to Avakov?
I have met with him, yes. But okay, just in the beginning of this year, I had this meeting, and we agreed on having next meetings, but because of this pandemic, we have not been able to organize them.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have access that I cannot complain in this regard. Then regarding some like the previous initiatives, what we have been developing with them, for example, this serious organized crime threat assessment, SOCTA, which is very widely used in the, for example, in the European Union member states. Of course, we would like them to get it in practice. But there has been also some delay in this regard. Text is basically, it's ready. It should be just taken forward and start implementation. Then we also proposed for them, and it was all even a little bit tested, kind of like a merger project where we would like to combine these investigative and operatives and make these police officers to be like more universal police officers. And there also that, okay, there was some promising moments and that we were thinking that it will go ahead, but currently it's not going ahead. But let's see how it will be developing in the future. Then there is a intelligence-led policing, and it was already kind of this also mentioned this resource issue, that if you are not able to develop your working tools, if you are not able to collect and analyze information and based on that react, then you need a lot of resources, and that's surely also one of those challenges in Ukraine. That it's true that this police force it's pretty big. That there was that chat regarding Finnish police forces, that why it is so small compared to the number of citizens and geographical area, that I think that you could call it effectiveness somehow.
Okay.
And of course, it depending on the tools what you have available. Then, yeah, do you have question?
Yeah, no, we're down to the last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Somebody...
Yeah, I know that. Yeah. Then, okay, just a few things very quickly. That then we also see that there is need to develop further on this human resources management system, and they should have these individual and organizational performance evaluation systems. And of course, they should have this more like a service-oriented approach in their service. Then it was already mentioned by many of speakers today that police officers should not be protecting each other, and they should be made responsible if they commit a crime or if they have some misconduct. That's clear. And then this corruption issue, which is of course one let's say long-term challenge. We are happy that in Ukrainian National Police they have actually plans to develop anti-corruption units at the National Police in all the regions, and this is of course excellent. But we think that all this should start from the training system, and they should integrate this anti-corruption training and developing this kind of anti-corruption profession into their education system, and it should start from the Ministry of Interior universities. And okay. Of course, yeah, it should be in the system, in the part of this human resources management system. And then,
I want to, I'm going to give everybody a chance to wrap up, but thanks for the overview.
Yeah.
Speaking of corruption, I would like to ask Tetiana Pechonchyk to talk about the backpacks case, because we're talking about corruption here that touched very close to Avakov. And besides the fact that the Interior Ministry seems incapable of investigating serious crimes like bank fraud, like murder, Gangadzi's murder, Euromaidan murders, other financial crimes, and so forth, we also have his credibility suffering because of the backpacks case. Can you tell people what that was all about?
Yes, I think that Avakov had to be dismissed after this backpacks case, because it was a clear evidence of corruption and some politicization of processes, and we need the full police to be depoliticized. And the whole problem is the lack of accountability and lack of responsibility. And we can introduce many important ideas like anti-corruption units inside police, etc., etc. But it would not work if people do not have any political responsibility. When those who are on the top of this system, they held accountable for all these deeds, for all failures to reform the police. And frankly speaking, I do not believe that with this minister we can expect anything meaningful in terms of anti-corruption work inside police and the continuation of the reform. And our organization, we were involved in the very beginning. We were involved in the police reform, in the patrol police reform. We were inspired by it. We were working in the commissions on hiring selecting the new patrol policemen. We were involved in the process of human rights training for new patrol police, but then and also in the process of reattestation of the rest of the police servicemen. But then, as it was mentioned, many of them came back to the police. Those people who were fired, and now it's sabotage, and therefore nothing to expect as for me.
Just to close it to the backpacks case, that was a case in which Avakov son and a former top aide were caught on video allegedly scheming to overcharge the Ministry of Interiors to the tune of $500,000. A witness in the case was allegedly harassed by Avakov himself. He denies it. What happened to that case? What happened to the backpacks case? As I understand it, this special anti-corruption prosecutor's office closed it, or is that still ongoing?
It was closed, as I remember. It was closed. As I remember, I really don't want to just put some misunderstanding, but as my understanding, it was closed.
Okay, that's a very serious thing. We have Khatia on the floor, 2 minutes each, folks. Talk about whatever you want. A lot was discussed. Very much appreciative of your time and expertise.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, this is kind of brilliant discussion, and always people who are very much involved in the law enforcement reform in Ukraine and defending the human rights and the property rights. It's so important and essential and vital for Ukraine itself. And actually, as a chief, I had been working with the mission so well. I mean, was the predecessor of the current head, and but I have to say that probably, and it will be the same words, that it's not the while you're the minister, yes, you're the political figure, but we have to understand that no political figure can cover his throne. It's not the Game of Thrones, his throne, and interfere into the operational investigation activities. It's #1 rule. And so my perspective as a person who really are a huge fan of the Ukrainian future and all Ukrainians, just the wealth and democratic development, etc. I have to say that politics and law enforcing must be divided. I mean, if somebody is interfering, as a minister or as a some political figure, then law enforcement sector can't really work effectively. That's my understanding. So, and that's why I'm saying that this rule of law means that the political situation, political figures are somewhere they're doing their political job and politics, and law enforcement, it's investigation, etc. We can talk about the technical details. We can talk about the education. We can talk about the training. We can talk about the structural changes and anti-corruption changes, but if there is no very, tough approach to that nobody can cover up the throne, sitting on. Because it's a law enforcement, then nothing can be changed. But I do hope that the common efforts will be very, very effective. Thank you very much for giving me floor, and
Khatia, thanks for joining
in this great discussion.
Anastasia, are you online?
Yes.
The floor is yours, but at what point does all of this become a political liability for the president? But you're free to discuss whatever you want in your closing remarks.
There was a question from some of our participants, what has to be done in order for the president to intervene on this issue. The question on the agenda here, as you of course know, is who will be the one instead? And that's not an easy question, of course, because of all the machinery and the complications of the system and the amount of powers that is under the Minister of Interior. But although I do recognize it's not an easy question, I think we cannot allow ourselves to be comforted by this question and to pretend in front of ourselves that there is no answer to this question and there cannot be an answer to this question. In my opinion, we simply cannot allow ourselves to be comforted by that, and it is our political responsibility to offer this person, to find this person, and not to pretend not to be covering for non-existent or inefficient police reform forever.
Okay, Matthew.
Thank you. I would just summarize the sort of the main gist of what I had originally shared. In particular, that police reform really needs to be looking at professional responsibility and accountability mechanisms for officers. What we're seeing is that they're not being held accountable for doing their jobs or for not doing their jobs, and then that's the beginning of a whole cascade of problems. And then I wanted to respond quickly to a question about militarization of the police. I know there has been discussions and laws proposed on giving policing powers to the National Guard, for example, and also developments recently with respect to Municipalna Ochrona and other sort of militia, semi-official policing law enforcement groups. And I think what really needs to happen is to focus on making the police good rather than increasing the number of entities that have policing functions, because these other entities don't have proper oversight for basically being police forces. And so we would have a lot of concerns about increasing of organizations, including militarized ones that are doing policing in Ukraine. Thank you all.
Okay, Matilda. Final words.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the issues come down to impunity, lack of accountability, and this is what underpins a large range of the human rights concerns within Ukraine. There are concrete things that can be done and need to be done, so progress needs to be made on those. There has been some progress. I mean, it's not been enough and a lot more needs to happen, but there has been some. But on these underlying issues of accountability and impunity, that's where the work really needs to be done.
Okay, thank you. Antti, will EUAM stay on the job?
Of course, we will continue this work with the national police, and actually we need to remember that most of our resources are used for the support of national police. But I would like to highlight one issue that I think that what I have said many times in public also, that if in Ukraine you want to be successful in these different law enforcement agencies reforms, you need to be first able to reform security service, and then everything else will start moving forward. Thank you.
Antti, you're breaking up.
Okay. Is it now okay?
Connection. Tetiana, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Can you give a final word, because I think we lost Antti.
Yes, I just would like to address this argument mentioned by Anastasia. Who else can be a Minister of Interior, and that there is is not wise to change the Minister of Interior in a war, in a conflict. But it's funny because
I was not saying that. I just voiced that there is an argument and that this is our political job to find an answer to that.
Yes, and I always hear that argument from many people, from many sides, but it is possible to change the head of the SBU, the Minister of Defense, and nothing happens, but it looks like Minister Avakov is an untouchable person. I think the problem is the real lack of political willingness to find the person. And if there is a will, I think that there are a lot of decent people who could be a good Minister of Interior, much better than Mr. Avakov.
Thank you. Antti, I believe I cut you off.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, clearly.
Yes, that what I was saying in the very end, that I think that this reform of the security service, it's a reform of like a mother of all the reforms, let's say. And you need to be successful in that. And after that, I think that you have better possibilities to move forward with the other reforms of law enforcement agencies. That's all.
That's a great other discussion. You know, we're out of time, and to summarize it, obviously we have still some Soviet legacies, nearly 30 years into Ukraine's independence. That can't be an excuse forever. That system was in which the prosecutor commanded everything. The state determined innocence or guilt, and the legacies remain, as from this discussion, a cast of untouchables, a lack of competence in the police department in terms of investigating and solving crimes, a lack of political will to be accountable, and a very politicized police department where the top person is a politician and with no law enforcement background, and not much success in 6 years in investigating the most serious crimes confronting Ukraine. And I think that's what Ukrainians fought the revolutions for, and that justice is what they want. And that element is still missing. And that's going to be an ongoing discussion, not only in Ukraine, but as we know, in the police role and effectiveness in the rest of the world, and in terms of its humane response to keeping public order. I thank you all. Hope to see you again. It's been a great discussion, and let's continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.